Welcome back. In today's episode, we speak with Veenu Keller. Veenu is going to share with us the most important habits parents need to take with their kids.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. What are some of the most important habits that parents need to do other than the ones you've already mentioned?
Listen to your kids. One of the things that I speak about at different, school settings, organization settings, group settings, is really about bullying, self-harm, and suicide. And one of the reasons parents blame themselves is because after it's happening, after they understand it, they say, I didn't know. My mom was just here and she was visiting and she says, can I get a copy of your book? And my books have been out for a while, and I've never given my mom a copy of my book. And there was a fear that, wow, like she's really going to read how my life was. And did she know? And about a week ago, she finished both books, and we were driving, and she held my hand, and she said, I'm sorry, I get a little choked up. She's like, I had no idea. I had no idea you were living in such pain. And I am so sorry for not knowing. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, it's okay. You did the best that you could with what you knew. And when you told me that first time that teasing's just teasing, kids will be kids, at that moment, I knew you would never understand what the pain I was going through, so I shut myself off. And she says, well, when I grew up, that's what it was. Kids teased. And, my mom is from India, and she grew up in India, and kids tease in India. I don't think that just happens in the USA. So I said, again, Mom, you did the best you could. And I said, but let me tell you, I found the gift in it. Look at what I'm doing with my life, because I have found the gift in all the pain that I endured then to create myself in a beautiful state. I no longer suffer in it anymore.
And you're able to help others as a result of what you've gone through.
Absolutely. And so what could have been different?
Yeah.
We ask better questions to our kids. How do we listen to our kids? Is it just like listening to a podcast, or is it recognizing their behaviors? I'm going to tell all you parents out there, your kids' behavior will tell you a lot more than what they're telling you. If you're getting one answer, how's your day? Great. Ask a better question, get a better answer. You want to know what separates us from, the 99.95 of us from the rest of society, is that we ask a better question to get a better answer.
So important. Well, I know one of the things you were not teased about as a child is your great hair. It's a little known fact. Years ago, Veenu and I were somewhere, and I'm like, wow, you have really nice hair. And I grabbed her hair. I was like, wow, this is beautiful. And it's something that stuck with her for years. Years later, she said, do you know that compliment you gave me? I said, wait a second. I don't compliment. I make observations. I don't compliment. And then she told me.
Well, you'll be happy to know, Thor, I just got my hair done today. So in honor of you.
Well, if you ever have a chance to meet Veenu, you have to say, I gotta touch your hair, please. I love what you said about the bullying. Can you address for me, because I have such a hard time in this area. It seems like parents nowadays are doing so much to get in front of their children to make sure that everything's great. I remember it used to be helicoptering parents, and I attended an event recently from the admissions counselor for the Stanford University, and she said we're now calling it lawn mowing parents, and we get out in front and we make sure there's no obstacles for the child. And I think that we're raising kids that just aren't adapt to be able to take care of things. Touch on this for a moment.
So it's funny because I do some of my best thinking when I'm alone and I'm driving. And I had this thought the other day, is that we're raising our children in bubbles. So we put this bubble around them so they can't get hurt. They can't experience it. They, won't have the obstacles in front of them because we're going to take them out of their way first so they don't get hurt. But let me ask you, Thor, if you didn't go through your past the way you have, all the way from your child to now, would you be the same person you are today?
No, and I not that I enjoyed the trials and the tribulations, but it's part of who I am, and it's enabled me to reach people and to be who I am today. So I wouldn't change any of it.
Exactly. So what I like to see, and I like to change verbiage around. Like another strategy I want to give you guys about, how do you change your life? Change the meaning of it. Change the wording. Are they obstacles or are they growth? So if I said take the obstacles away from your child, most people will be like, absolutely. But if I said take the growth periods away from your child, would you do that?
Oh, nice.
One of my mentors, she's amazing, Becky Blake. I love her. And she said to me that no matter what we're challenged with our children, instead of protecting them, guide them through it. And that really aligns with what I'm saying. That's what I do. You can't, I have a 17-year-old, and I'm sure your 18-year-old goes to parties too, Thor. And you have to create that space of trust. So it's even at the point where my son will say, can I come home at 1? I'm not drinking. Now, is that saying that I concur with drinking? Absolutely not. He's underage. No way do I say it's okay to do that. But am I grateful that my son is honest with me to say, hey, look, I'm at a party. There's drinking going on. Are you or Brian, his stepdad, available to pick me up at 1? How lucky am I that my son doesn't have to lie to me about it?
Right.
How lucky am I that I don't have to go to the morgue tomorrow and identify my son's body because he was so afraid to tell me that he was drinking at the age of 18.
Yeah, I went through a situation just recently with my son. He had an auto accident. Thank God he was not injured or anybody else was injured. And it was right around the corner from where we live. And he asked me to, come on out. Dad, I got in an auto accident. Everyone's fine, but I need you, here. I was like, well, what would you like me to do? And he's like, well, I need your help. I'm like, well, son, you're 18 and is the police there? Yes, the police are there. Is everyone okay? Yeah. I'm like, well, you need to step up and start to deal with the results of things. So I actually did walk over. And it was funny because the cop came up and started talking to me. I said, you're talking to the wrong adult here. That's the man that you want to be talking to.
Beautiful. So again, let's use that as an example, Thor. If you were doing lawn mow therapy or parenting or whatever it's called, you would have taken that obstacle out of his way and you would have talked to the cop for them. But instead, you decided to say, this is a growth period for my son, and if he steps up now, where else will he step up in his life?
Exactly.
So great for you.
Yeah.
That, one of our mutual friends, Thor, Allison Hawkins, she is writing an amazing book on creating an independent child, because so many of us want to keep that child in a bubble, that now it's time to face the world, and they don't know how to do it. They're, Mom, could you call the school for me? Mom, can you make my doctor's appointment? Mom, my insurance on my car is expiring. And most of us moms are like, okay, let me do it. Okay, let me do it. Instead of saying, you know what? Here's the phone number. Here's the person you need to contact. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah, and I did that when they were younger. The kids were younger. And I just found that the results I was getting and the young adults that I was raising, it just wasn't a good strategy. And I really spent a lot of time trying to figure out a better strategy. So I've learned this by trial and error.
One of the things that I feel that I've done even before I had all this knowledge, I like to call it experiential parenting, where you allow your children to learn through their experiences. And I don't know if I'm making that up right now. I don't know if it's already a known parenting skill, but I can just tell you from where my standpoint is and why I call it that is exactly what you did. Your son was in a car accident. That's the experience. The outcome was he needed to speak to the cops and get through it. You allowed him through that experience to grow even further. That is experiential parenting. That is what I come into your home to help you realize that's what you need to do.
So bring us through the time when you had to make that shift, that change. You were in not a great place as a child or a young adult. And what changed? How did you get yourself out of that cycle of that belief system?
So when I was younger and I was being bullied and, I didn't feel I had my mom to talk to, it got worse. My story back then was nobody wanted me, nobody loved me, nobody cared about me. And I remember specifically the day that I was walking home from field hockey practice because the girls on my team were making fun of me and bullying me, and I didn't have a ride home anymore. My mom said she was too busy to pick me up, so I had to walk 1.5 miles home, and it was dark, and I was scared. And going back to that moment, I prayed to get kidnapped. I prayed that if somebody would just take me out of this life and kill me, I would be okay. And that was the night that I went home, and I made it home safely, and I got all my mom's prescriptions out. Now, mind you, it's probably like amoxicillin or something, like an antibiotic. But when I was 15, I didn't know that. I just thought it was medicine, and it would be the easiest way to kill myself. And I got all her pills out, and I was getting ready to take them, and a friend showed up, and he stopped me. And he took me to Taco Bell, and we talked about why I wanted to die so bad. And he was the first person that asked me, like, why is life so bad? Like, what is it that you want to take your life away? And I told him, and he made me feel better for that moment, took me home, and my mom had her first dose of reality of how bad my life was. Because she says, you were grounded, where did you go? And all I said to her is, it's called suicide, Mom. And she said, what? And I said, suicide. And I left, I went upstairs. I had no idea that my mom had stayed up all night crying, wondering how could she save her child? Is her child going to die tonight? The next day, I was committed to a psych hospital for 2 months. In that psych hospital, I learned how to cut. I had a roommate that would scratch herself till she bled. So she would cut herself with her fingernails. And I thought it was kind of weird. And I asked her, I said, why do you do that? And she says, because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel that I can get through it, that it's not that bad because I feel it on the outside. And I'm like, okay. Well, the next day I had a family meeting with like my parents and stuff. And I remember it did not go great. And I went back and I started to cut. And again, it was a learned behavior. I started cutting and I'm like, wow, it makes me feel so much better. I don't feel so numb anymore. I don't feel so alone anymore. Like I felt connected to myself. To cut through my own flesh made me feel empowered. It made me connected with myself. It made me feel that I wasn't numb anymore, that I was living and I wasn't dying. And going through that self-mutilation point of my life was my coping skill. It was a total coping skill. It was a private thing that I can do. My mom never knew I did this until I was an adult. And I didn't cut for long. I cut for maybe a 6-month period of time. I had one friend, who's my best friend to this day, Tiffany, who knew, but I don't know if she even knew how to respond to it. And I stayed in my suicidal patterns. That was my coping skill also, that if things didn't go right in my life, I'll just kill myself. And that led me to marrying the first guy he said that loved me. I was 18 and having 2 kids of my own. And I'm going to tell you, Thor, is that having my own kids was my only reason to live. They were my why. And I had a plan that in 2016, yes, this year, would be the year that I take my life, because my youngest at the time would be 18 and they wouldn't need me anymore. I did my job as a parent. Now I can leave this life. It wasn't until I was 34 years old that somebody told me to go to this event. And I thought they were kind of crazy. We were walking on fire, and no, I did not burn my feet off. It shifted me. And the key distinction that shifted my life from being in abusive relationships, which, by the way, is self-harm as well, and wanting to commit suicide, was learning to love myself.
So the change sounds like it happened over a period of time. There wasn't one just moment where it just all shifted. It was a process.
Well, from being depressed and self-harm, there definitely was that moment where, like, this isn't solving my problems. There was that, that's why it didn't last that long for me personally, because it wasn't really taking away the pain and the loneliness. Like, I was still realizing that I'm still lonely.
Yeah.
And
this should be a Taco Bell commercial. You
Right.
could be the new spokesperson. Save your life. Go to Taco Bell.
But the distinction of being suicidal, now understand, I was suicidal since I was 13 years old. That was my first thought, that I prayed to God to not let me wake up because I didn't want to go to school the next day. And if you understand, 160,000 kids today, well, it's summer, but during school year, do not want to go to school because they're so afraid to be bullied. They're so afraid to face the fact that they're alone. They're so afraid to face the fact that nobody likes them. They're so afraid to face the fact that they're not enough. And that was me. I was that statistic. And I started to pray to God. So the pivotal moment where I was suicidal one day, and not the next, was that seminar. And it was the power of loving yourself.
You know, I did a episode recently where we were talking about relationships and talking about how important it is to show up to the relationship whole and complete and loving yourself. Because if you can't do that first, you can't do that for a partner.
It is so funny you say that, because when I got married at 18, I found myself divorced 12 years later, and I didn't love myself. I didn't love myself through that whole relationship. I would find people, toxic relationships, abusive relationships. If you tell your brain something long enough, it starts to believe it. And when it starts to believe it, it's not going to accept something that makes you question if that's the truth. So when you tell yourself that you're not enough, that you're ugly, that you're stupid, that nobody wants you, you're not going to go find a great partner to make you feel the opposite. You're going to go find partners that continue that belief system in your head. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
So that's part of the self-harm, right? You're harming yourself. You're creating that I'm not good enough feeling. And that won't change until that day that you say, I love you. I really love you. And this is what I'm going to do to show you that I love you. I'm going to make a difference in my life. I'm not going to be that person that says, oh, poor me. I'm going to be that person that says, what's next? And when I made that shift in November of 2007, I got married to my love of my life. We just had the twins 4 years ago. And I have created, remember what I just said, I have created the kind of life that I know I now deserve.
Beautiful.
My husband adores me.
He
doesn't
does.
just love me. He adores me.
Yes, he does. You know, you're a superstar in helping families and kids through difficult times. What's your greatest parenting weakness? That concludes part 2 of our interview with Veenu Keller. Please keep an eye out for part 3 later this week. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already done so, please head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Also, please share this with family, friends, coworkers, or anyone that could benefit from this information. To make it very easy to share these episodes, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode that you want to share, and you can post it to your timeline. You just might be helping one of your friends on Facebook by sharing it on your page. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. The email is info@thorconklin. While at the website, please sign up for our weekly newsletter with additional tricks, tips, tools, and psychology on how to be a peak performer. Remember, these episodes are anywhere between 6 and 35 minutes and are meant to be consumed during dot time doing other things. Until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.